Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is directed to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister inform the House whether the government intends that employers and employees may vary the working week, penalty rates and holiday loadings in enterprise bargains? Is he aware of any misunderstandings about the scope and nature of enterprise bargaining conducted with the government's encouragement?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, let me assure the House that hours of work, penalty rates and holiday loadings not only can be varied in enterprise bargains, but are being varied in many of the 360 bargains which have already been registered with the Industrial Relations Commission. Now, the member for Bennelong said last month, and I quote him, Mr Speaker, because it's an interesting quote, "The most important message coming from the opposition in the area of industrial relations," he said, "is the quite dramatic proposal to move away entirely from the concept of a fixed working week." Well, the fact is, Mr Speaker, the fixed working week is no longer, as hundreds of enterprise agreements now attest. Penalty rates can be negotiated, holiday loadings can be negotiated. For example, the National Australia Bank and the ANZ Bank have developed agreements which allow their employees to choose any combination of working hours, which in the case of NAB amount to at least 38 hours a week or 152 hours a month. That's any combination of working hours. There's similarly flexible arrangements in the Sheraton Towers Agreement, the Coles Supermarket Agreement, in the Southern Cross Machinery Agreement and many other hundreds of agreements now being negotiated. The Sheraton Towers Agreement has folded ordinary time earnings and penalty rates, that is, put penalty rates and ordinary time earnings together into an annual salary regardless of hours worked. The Coles Supermarket Agreement provides wage increases in return for greater flexibility in working hours and reductions in night shift penalty rates. Workers in Southern Cross Machinery agreed to arrange their working hours so they receive one weekly salary by working less than 38 hours a week in winter and around 42.5 hours in summer for all workers. And there are endless examples, Mr Speaker, in a list too long to read. The only condition we impose in all of this flexibility, upwards and sideways, is that the agreements don't leave employees worse off than they were before. And this, of course, is the condition the honourable member for Bennelong wishes to attack. He's not after flexibility up and out, he's after flexibility down. That's the one thing that the set of generic arrangements in place now for enterprise agreements under the scrutiny of the Commission will not allow. They'll allow all manner of flexibility, penalty rates, changes to annual leave, working hours, maternity, sick leave, the lot. It's all negotiable and is being negotiated in hundreds of agreements, but they won't allow flexibility down, which is the one thing the Liberal Party wants. It wants to drive Australian wages down further. Now, Mr Speaker, figures from the United States Bureau of Labour Statistics, the US Bureau, show that in 1991, hourly labour costs for production workers in manufacturing in Australia were 20% below the OECD average. That is, we are already hugely competitive in wages, and that the notion that wages need to be pushed down further is simply about depressing Australian living standards and giving Australians the sort of wage levels which obtain to our near north in countries which are developing countries, and not, as they claim, for flexibility in the labour market in the working place. Now, under the opposition's proposals, Mr Speaker, all these agreements and all federal awards would be automatically cancelled. And the only way any agreement would obtain is if both the employees and the employers agree. Otherwise, the whole award structure and agreement falls away. And what is the transitional arrangement? The transitional arrangement is that the new agreements would be common law contracts, and the common law contracts would need a QC to enforce them. So how is a metal stamper, how is an ordinary person, a metal stamper, say, in a metals business, going to deal with the employer if the employer happens to be a car company or a steel fabrication company? How is one small person going to deal with the employer who then gets pushed onto a common law contract and their only recourse is to get a QC to represent them under a common law case, which might take a year or two to be listed? In other words, all the Industrial Relations Commission machinery goes away. The machinery which is there now to to look at any disputes under agreements where the agreement isn't clear or where a matter needs to be settled. That goes, and you damn some poor person to a common law contract to then go and find a QC to represent themselves because you don't think that the strength between Labor and business is such that now the wage share in GDP is at 1960s levels, as the American Bureau says, 20% below the OECD average, but it's not enough for you. But this claim that you need to have flexibility when you can roll penalty rates, holiday hours of work, holiday pay, maternity leave, sick leave into any agreement you like with any sort of flexibility, and is being done in hundreds of cases, that you can do it up and out but you can't go down. The flexibility you want is down. Now, Mr Speaker, this ranks with the GST as one of the most pernicious policies being offered by the opposition. This is the one which will actually rip into living standards at source, and that every Australian working person who values their wage, their pay packet, their holiday leave, their hours of work, or in the case of women, their maternity leave,
Member for Groom,
when they understand that all that's going to be put asunder, not to provide more flexibility, as the member for Bennelong or the opposition assert, but simply to drive down their gross earnings, to push their earnings down, their total remuneration down, and then their recourse will be, with a QC in the courts. That's when people will understand that what the Reverend Wandsworth says about human beings and that the Catholic Church says about the issues in Fightback mean what they say about the rights of human beings, the right to live in dignity with reasonable wages and conditions, and not to have them put asunder in some phony quest for flexibility which is already there, but where you make totally unequal the battle between business and employees, or an employee. That is the weight of a business and its management against one single person, and denying them the right to band together without the agreement of the employer, other than to make a common law contract. Now, Mr Speaker, this is what the Liberal Party is after. It's after flexibility, all right. It's after flexibility, but it's flexibility downwards.
I warn the member
for Groom. It's not flexibility upwards, it is not flexibility sideways, it's not flexibility out. It's flexibility down. And all the more strength to all the people questioning the whole notion of Fightback, the pernicious nature of the GST, and an industrial relations policy which I said could have been given in Lancashire in 1895.
The Honourable